like to call this board meeting to order at 9:30 a.m. February 24th, 2007. Can we have the roll call to establish a quorum?
Roll call. Hildy Agonato. Absent. Jamie Zamora.
Here.
Kipman Chan.
Here.
Dr. Michael Corradino.
Here.
Francisco Shea.
Here.
Jeannie Kang.
Present.
Dr. Amy Mteki.
Present.
6-0, we have a quorum, Jamie.
Great. Moving forward to item 2, opening remarks. Good morning to everyone. Happy New Year. I know you're not seeing things. I am not Hildy. Our fearless president, unfortunately, had some unexpected work responsibilities back in Los Angeles, but she sends her greetings. So know that she will be back at our next meeting, but she just wanted to pass that along to you. So we will move forward with the agenda. Within my opening remarks, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. So we're going to set a lunch for 12:30 for 45 minutes, so from 12:30 to 1:15. So to ensure that everyone has enough time to get back to their flights, drive back home, we want to be respectful to everybody's time. As well as in terms of public comment, we're going to allow public comment for each piece of the agenda, as well as there's going to be a piece, an item 3, to talk about public comment items for items not on the agenda. However, we're going to institute the rule that Hildy established a few meetings prior, basically to 2 minutes. So Ben, our EO, will be our timer, and he will provide a little handy sheet to help you with your presentation. And again, it's to make sure we get through everything today because we have a long agenda. Moreover, if I forget to ask for public comment, understanding it's not because I'm trying to limit it. I must have just forgotten. So make sure to raise your hand and let me know. A couple other housekeeping items. Referring to the agenda, if you have an agenda on you, we're going to move a few items up to ensure that we can get our speakers in on time. So we're going to move items 11 to after number 3, as well as number 10. So it's a DOI presentation as well as a budget presentation. Item number 12 is being removed from the agenda for a later date. Item 13, the closed session deliberations, will be moved to after number 17. Board numbers good? Great. We're going to move forward to item number 3, public comment for items not on the agenda. I remind you that you have 2 minutes to provide your comments on items not on the agenda. Anybody? Seeing none? Thank you. So we'll move forward now to item number 11 that was moved up, presentation on an overview of the Division of Investigation from the Department of Consumer Affairs and Services provided by Rex Covart. Oh, yes. Rex, there you go. Thank you, Rex.
And Stephanie Whitley.
Thank you. You want to grab the other mic? Good morning, board members. My name is Rex Cowart. I'm the Northern Area Commander for the Division of Investigation. And we're going to set up a PowerPoint as part of our presentation, so just give us a few moments.
Are we going to do it up here or just there?
Okay.
Oh, Rex, can you both state your name again and your position with the department?
Yes, my name is Rex Cowart. I'm the Northern Area Commander for the Division of Investigation with the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Whitley. I am a supervising investigator with California Department of Consumer Affairs, Division of Investigation, and I am over our enforcement support unit.
Great, thank you. And again, for the public, understanding that this presentation came out of the suggestion from Hildy, considering she really wanted the new board members to understand what we go through in terms of our enforcement process. A lot of our work is done with DOI, so that's the genesis of where this came from. Great. Take it away.
Okay. So we were just going to give this overview. And as you know, and if you can see the slides, we're just doing some real basic organizational charts and diagrams. But the Department of Consumer Affairs is the umbrella agency for all the boards and bureaus and the Division of Investigation. So we just wanted to kind of display where we fit in the line under Consumer Affairs, and we provide investigative services for all the boards and bureaus. Our mission is to provide law enforcement investigative services to protect California consumers and licensees by effectively and efficiently enforcing laws, regulations, and professional standards.
I just wanted to add, so when you see our ourselves up there on the right, so we are a law enforcement agency. We also, within the Department of Consumer Affairs, have one other law enforcement agency, and that's the dental board have their own sworn investigative staff.
Okay. So we'll talk about the organization of the division first. And we have a chief of our division that oversees 4 separate units under the Division of Investigation. I'm going to start with the Investigation and Enforcement Unit. That's basically the original core Division of Investigation. And then we'll talk about other ones that were added later. So this investigation, the IEU unit, provides investigative services for your board specifically and many other boards. We have 7 field offices. We have about 40 investigators in all those offices. My Sacramento office has 2 teams in one office.
So then above the IAU block there, you have the Enforcement Support Unit, and that is my unit. And we are tasked with, number one, we intake all the cases from all of our boards and bureaus, so it's a central intake for our division. We review and then process out to the field. Part of our duties also is client outreach, so I know your staff very, very well. And we have a great working relationship. I know everybody, I see everybody at least daily. So we are in great communication with your board, which we very much appreciate our relationship. And in the past, I had the honor to present to the board when you guys were needing some enforcement assistance. And at that point, we had one of our analysts come down and actually assist your enforcement unit. So that's part of the service we offer, is we never want one of our boards or bureaus to be in a situation where they can't fulfill their enforcement mission of protecting the public, so we're there for that assistance also. In addition, we have, when you see our lower right here is our Health Quality Investigation Unit. So it's actually where I started my career at the Department of Consumer Affairs as a medical board investigator, and probably as many of you guys are aware, July 2014, all the sworn investigative staff from the medical board were put under the division. So we do have, that's what separated our unit. So they obviously handle primarily investigations for the Medical Board of California.
Our 4th unit is our Special Operations Unit. And this unit handles internal affairs investigations, and this would be personnel type of investigations, misconduct. Also, they handle the background investigations for all our peace officers. There's extensive requirements for peace officers to go through a very extensive background, and they handle that. They also handle training elements for the division, our quarterly firearms training and our defensive tactics training, and any other specialized training that we need. And then they also have computer forensics team that they oversee, that services that both our other units, health quality insurance and enforcement, can utilize when we need to analyze computers and cell phones and things like that as part of our investigation. They also handle the workplace violence for the department, so they would respond and deal with those types of issues if that arises within the Department of Consumer Affairs. So talking about the client agencies that we deal with within Consumer Affairs, our Investigation and Enforcement Unit handles a vast amount of different boards and bureaus. They're all different sizes, and the number of investigations that we handle vary. I've highlighted acupuncture there in yellow, and that's the unit that handles investigations for your board. The Health Quality Investigation Unit, as we said, came from the medical board. They were the original investigation unit that got transferred over, and essentially they maintained the boards that they handled. They had the medical board and 4 other allied health boards that they traditionally handled. Because during this transition, they've had quite a few vacancies and some issues of trying to fill those vacancies, and our IEU unit has, in assisting them, has taken over some of the investigations for 2 of the boards, the osteopathic medical board and the psychology board.
I wanted to point out, because some people look at that list and say, wow, kind of pretty daunting with the list of clients that we deal with. I have to say that the variety is what keeps our investigators kind of up on their investigative skills, because we have to be, right? With the number of clients and the variety of kind of crimes and allegations we're dealing with, it's definitely helped us hone our skills as investigators. And there is definite overlap when you're talking about cases, and we'll talk about allegation types, but what's going on in your board may be fraud is equal on the other side of maybe nursing or PT. So there's the type of crimes, the type of allegations that definitely occur is a lot of overlap. So our expertise is be able to use kind of across the board with our clients.
And yeah, we try to, as part of Stephanie's unit is, in that outreach, is trying to, communicate with all the boards and share that information so that, we can share best practices back and forth with all the different boards.
So here's the slide. So these are kind of the investigative case types that our investigators are handing out in the field, and you guys know your board types of cases that are coming through, and a lot of similar cases are coming out. So a lot of fraud, insurance fraud, billing issues, sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, a lot of unlicensed activity cases also. So those are just some highlights of the cases that we're seeing coming over.
So this chart is just kind of a brief diagram of the complaint process, and I was just going to kind of go through it real quickly. It looks like a roadmap that takes you all over the place, and it does, and it's actually, there's a lot more detail to it in other diagrams, but essentially it starts in this left corner up here about information comes to the board either as a complaint or some general information that they discover, and they're going to determine if they need to conduct an investigation. So they're going to determine the jurisdiction. Do they have jurisdiction over it? And your staff, your board staff, make that determination. And if they don't, then it gets referred over to whoever else has that jurisdiction, or it's closed because it's not under your jurisdiction. But if it is under your jurisdiction, then it's going to move on to determining if it needs an investigation. And we have with the, we have case referral guidelines for the Division of Investigation that help determine if we're going to conduct the investigation or if the boards are going to handle it in-house. Many boards have some non-sworn staff and some analysts that can do desk investigations, and so depending on the severity of the case, they may keep it in-house and conduct that investigation and gather whatever information they need to move it forward. But if it rises to the level that you need DFI services, then a request for service comes over to DFI, and then we initiate it. It comes into Stephanie's unit. As we talked about, they process it, and it comes out to investigators to be assigned to one of those field offices. We try to assign cases geographically so it's closer to those field offices, but depending on resources, we may travel anywhere in the state to handle that case. So once it's assigned to an investigator, it's going to go through, many different processes. These are the generic steps. We're going to be interviewing witnesses, the complainants, interview the subject. We'll be gathering documents. Sometimes there might be an inspection. We would have a board expert or an inspector from a board, if they have that, come out with us and maybe do an inspection of a location if we have inspection authority. We may be doing undercover operations for some of the cases, unlicensed activity, various fraud. We may do, some undercover activity and see how the operation is actually working. Part of our investigation and part of our authority is, we can prepare and serve search warrants, and if we need that as a tool to gather that evidence, we may do that. We can also issue investigative subpoenas. We have that authority to gather records as well. Once everything's gathered and prepared, everything goes into an investigative report, and even if we're doing unlicensed activity and we issue a misdemeanor citation, there's still a report that has to be submitted back to the board. If we have criminal violations, we're also going to submit that same report to the district attorney or city attorney in the jurisdiction that the violations had occurred. So that would take us, if we go to the criminal process, we're going to have submitting our evidence to the DA or the city attorney, and then they're going to determine if they're going to file it as a criminal filing or sometimes as a civil filing, depending on the charges. It'll go to trial, or they may have a settlement, and then you'll either get a conviction or acquitted, and then that information would come back to the board as what happened there. That same report comes to the board, and you begin your process for any disciplinary action. And so the board staff review it. If it has to go out for an expert, they would send it out, and then they get that information back, and then transmit that to the district or the Attorney General's office to start the administrative process for prosecuting that case. And then you're either going to have an administrative hearing as part of that process, or they're going to work on a stipulated agreement, and then, as you know, you get back the proposed decision from an ALJ, and you're going to make the final determination or decision on that, or you're going to get that proposed settlement and make that final determination, and it lands back into your pocket.
So when we were talking about, Rex was talking about sworn staff versus non-sworn. There was the Consumer Protection and Enforcement Initiative back in 2009, which the legislature enacted a law that gave some boards non-sworn special investigative staff to help with cycle times for investigations. So there has been, like Rex was saying, a case referral, case acceptance guideline for DFI, what cases are appropriate for the division to keep, what cases are appropriate for the board to keep. Cricket and Christine are excellent analysts and do a great job with desk investigations where they are able to. They are very self-sufficient, and we definitely have a good relationship communicating on what we can do to assist your staff on doing some tasks without forwarding them out to the division. So just kind of wanted to point that out. These are kind of the differences between the sworn and non-sworn staff, and people will often say, oh, you're peace officers, what does that mean? So basically this is what this means. As a peace officer, we do have police powers, as you see your locals, your local sheriffs and your police departments. We too have those powers. It's just a different, it's just on the different penal code. So we do go through an academy, a police academy, before we are able to start working, and we do carry firearms. Like Rex was saying, we have to go through a required training, whether it is firearms, whether it is arrest and control, or like for you folks as professionals, your CEs, we also have to keep up on our education for being in law enforcement. So like we said before, kind of what your non-sworn, we say non-sworn investigator or analytical staff can definitely handle a lot of tasks without having to refer a case on to us. So this is interesting. When I never like to present with Rex, because Rex has been here for, I'm saying, like 100 years. And but when I started with
Really only 23.
when I started with Consumer Affairs in 2001, trying to find out who the Division of Investigation was, or even as a sworn medical board investigator, not a lot of information. So we are proud to say, as of a couple years ago, we do have our own page off of the DCA main page, and it kind of highlights what the division does. We also blog out on stories that we are proud of, that we have partnered with our clients and definitely have had a great result for protecting our consumers in California, so we like to highlight them there. So anytime if you kind of want to go in and see what the division is up to, I invite you to visit the page.
So this ends our presentation. We know it was very brief, but if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know.
Great. Well, thank you, Rex and Stephanie. And again, Rex, thank you for your over 100 years of service. So we
Yeah, I know, right?
I had one quick question. Stephanie, what raises a case above a desk investigation?
So our criteria typically is set on if you're going to need cases that are going to need in-person interviews that have allegation of patient harm. Those are going to rise to the level that need to come out to the division. Any criminal allegations, any cases that are basically that have something extra to than just a standard of care case. That probably didn't answer your question.
No, it didn't.
Okay.
And you work with our staff to ensure that we know which ones we're going to take or not.
Yes, for sure. Better than probably any board
Oh, great.
within our
Good to hear,
department.
Christine. Good job.
Yeah, yes.
And in terms of the intake, how long does it take from intake to process?
So typically, if Christina Cricket would send a request for service through our tracking system, we get them. They'll walk those supporting docs up to us, and we can get that case probably out to the field in a couple of days.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very quick turnaround.
And so when a case comes out to the field, it comes to the commander. I have a counterpart, Danny Elias, who works in the southern area, has 4 of the offices, and then my 4 offices up here. The cases will come across our desk. We'll give it a quick review. If we catch anything, address that. But it gets referred out immediately out to our field offices. Then the supervisor is going to review it and assign it to an investigator. And that can take anywhere from a few days to maybe a week or 2.
Gotcha. And you're housed here, right, in this building? Or
Yeah, the Sacramento field office is actually right across the hall from the Acupuncture board office. So we run into everybody every day.
It's probably the only board I know the first name of every staff that you guys have. So.
Any more questions from the board?
Yeah.
Everybody good? Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you
I'm
very
sorry,
much.
public comment?
Oh.
And remind you to announce your name, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Neil Miller, California Society for Acupuncture and Asian Medicine. Yeah, I have a question regarding an interagency complaint. In other words, if somebody, a nurse was doing acupuncture, or if one of the other specialists was doing acupuncture, and a complaint comes into here, they regulate acupuncturists, but not other people. So is there a process or a procedure for one board under DCA to be able to communicate so that we can better protect the consumer? Because it's becoming an issue, and I'm going to bring it up later to the board, but I want to be able to know what is the official policy, and is there a way that, if there's a problem, to fix it, and if there is a policy, how to go along with it.
Right. It's a great question. So oftentimes, if it is, if the board receives a complaint and it's right on the complaint, this individual is a RN and they are practicing acupuncture, then obviously that's easier to handle, and then there's going to be some communication through those boards or through the division as a conduit, because we typically are handling investigations for both of those boards. That being said, have we had investigations where it starts as an unlicensed practice of acupuncture and we discover that they're actually a registered nurse? Yes, that does occur with not just that situation, but other practices. And then we will communicate to that board who's actually has that license. We will communicate back with them and provide them with a copy of that investigation report.
And what if a medical doctor was directing a nurse to do acupuncture, which is also a violation of law?
Correct.
So then who would someone make a complaint?
Oh. We'll share over here.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If, for instance, a medical doctor was directing a nurse under his authority to do acupuncture, he's in violation of the law as well. So where would the complaint go? As an acupuncturist, if I found this, what would be the smoothest way? To report to the board and then the board would talk to those other agencies? Or would I make a complaint to both the medical board and the nurses? I wouldn't know where to start the process. You know, because I have a familiarity with this board, I would love to be able to go to this board and then know that the law is set up or that the process is set up, that they would complain to both the nurses board, the medical board, and then an investigation would then an official complaint would take place, or as a consumer, do I have to make an official complaint and then they would follow up along the process through the division?
So that happens often. We'll have it, and then we'll have a complaint that is sent to like the medical board, but it's the allegations are 5 different licensee types, right? So we do handle that, and it is up. We can't say we want you to go to one point. We rather the complaints go to every point, but that does just to make sure that that every entity knows what's going on. That being said, the acupuncture board will communicate back to the medical board. That is the practice that I am aware of. And then with us too, obviously, like I was saying, we would be the conduit to get that information to whatever board has a licensee that's, participating in whatever said complaint. So when we have investigations, for instance, like a medical spa situation where you have nurses that are actually practicing the unlicensed practice of medicine because the actual physician is not supervising them efficiently, so therefore it sets up this unlicensed practice of medicine. We will coordinate investigations with our HQIU side because they're doing the investigation on the doctor. So it's a lot of coordination. Do things fall through the cracks? Sure, they do, but we would like to think that, as long as those complaints go to those different entities, then we all circle around back together.
And would it be also prudent to make is there a pathway to make a direct complaint to the Department of Consumer Affairs, who would then contact one of the boards, or if you're contacting the various boards and the departments so that now everybody has the information?
Sure. I mean, you could always, like I was on our blog site, there's email addresses, and you could always email or contact the Division of Investigation in a situation like that, and we could assist in the conduit of the information going to where it needs to go.
That's great information. Thank you.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So I have an example for you, and if you can answer this. So if there's another licensed practitioner in a separate entity, let's say, for example, chiropractor, right? And they're performing a technique, which I think is on our agenda today, dry needling, and they do some damage. That complaint does not go to our board because they're not licensed acupuncturists. So that complaint only goes to their board. How do we as a board get information onto who's practicing these procedures that are only supposed to be under a certain board, and it's now finding there's complaints, but they're not going to reach our board?
So I understand your question, and there are some, like I said, that are going to fall through the cracks. I can give you for instance, that we have LVNs who are representing themselves as registered nurses. We conduct an investigation for either board because it could come back from either of them. It's reported back to that other board, and then they can issue like a cite and fine if they're saying that was, if the RN board then can represent that LVN was representing yourself as an RN, then they can cite and fine them for unlicensed practice. So,
But it has to come to our board first somehow.
and that's, yeah, and that's information where, like I was saying, if the division is a part of that investigation, then we would be the conduit. If the case never came to us, I can't answer that question, but I can tell you with my communication with the boards that they tend to communicate with one another during those instances, but I can't say that for sure unless it comes over to the division.
Okay.
We've been trying to do more communication and outreach and having like enforcement consortium meetings with all the boards and bureaus and trying to share those ideas and open those avenues of communication. And so I think those types of things, your board staff, could do some outreach themselves with boards that you feel are doing those types of activities, and maybe work on developing that communication so that when those things come in, they're referring it to you or over to us, and then we can coordinate all of those investigations.
So you would suggest our board reach out to other boards that this may happen to open up a line of communication so that if any of those red flags get pulled up, because they're not licensed under our board, we're not going to hear from them. It's up to their responsibility to contact us?
I think that would be one avenue to start with is making that communication, opening up those avenues so that everybody can share that information. It gets tricky with complaints and confidential investigations and what they release, but
Sure.
I think at a higher level, EOs starting that communication and seeing how they can develop those lines of communication would be helpful.
Okay.
And that being said, we do often, if we have if we're conducting an investigation on a licensee and we feel that they are practicing medicine without a license, or they're engaging in an unlicensed practice of a board within our department, we'd reach out to the board because sometimes we need some expertise on, this is what I have, is this the practice?
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I'm hearing all that, and I love that, but there are a couple of cases I'm familiar with that didn't make it to us. And those are the ones we need to highlight, because that's a hot topic that we need to be aware of, and it came to my understanding and my conclusion that we're not gonna find out because they're not licensed. So they're not gonna find it, we're not gonna find our board. So people that are practicing our medicine but aren't licensed,
Yeah.
they're never gonna come to we're never gonna hear about it because they're not our responsibility per se. So if they're licensed under another board and they're practicing something else, then it's that board has to communicate with us that that's going on?
well, if that would be the conduit, because that's the only person that holds that information, right, at
Okay.
that point, so.
All right, we'll try to open up some relationships.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Dr. Mateki?
I just want to follow Dr. Corradino's question. So you mentioned so we can outreach to educate other board, about unlicensed practitioner practice, acupuncture. So at the same time, would a consumer who's the one being damaged, would they know to reach out to our board? So at least our board would know it, something happened. So that's the part I just wanted to, maybe Kelsey can help, should
Great,
we
but let's ensure we're
educate
being
the
careful,
consumer
everyone,
that-
of what we're talking about here and making sure this is generic, then it's something that's not on the agenda yet, so let's be careful. Any other questions from board members or the public? Public comment? You have 2 minutes. State your name, sir.
Ron Zeidman from Five Branches University. So does your department have jurisdiction over, for example, the Veterans Administration hospitals, which are part of the military? Because we've heard of non-licensed practitioners doing acupuncture in those settings, and would that be a complaint that you could handle?
We do, if the licensee that's working or in California at a veterans facility or something like that, that could fall under our jurisdiction to investigate, or the various boards' jurisdiction to look into matters. It will kind of depend on the complaint, if there's any exemptions for federal agencies with the state. There's some variables to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions from the public? Great. Thank you, Rex and Stephanie, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone, we're going to move along to item number 10, presentation regarding the board's budget from the Department of Consumer Affairs Budget Office. And I'd like to acknowledge Kitman for this presentation, considering he's brought up the budget a lot for us and kept us on our toes. So thank you, sir. If you could state your name for us.
Good morning. My name's Matt Nishimini. I'm with the DCA Budget Office. Am I on?
You're on. Just 1 second for that. Oh, sorry. So.
Thank you, Matt.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name's Matt Nishimini. I'm with the DCA Budget Office. I'm happy to be in front of this board today. Since we last reported here, the 2017-18 governor's budget was released on January 10th. And so you can see the full budget at the Department of Finance's website. In your packet, I have 3 documents. The first one is an expenditure report, and that is through the month of December. We also have a fund condition statement, and that fund condition statement is consistent with what was released in the 17-18 governor's budget. And then also I have an overview of the governor's budget process, the budget building process, so if anyone has any questions. It's kind of a detailed matrix chart, but if you had any questions, we can certainly go through that. For the current year, the 16-17 budget, there were really no changes to the budget that was released, the 17-18 governor's budget that was released. There were no incremental changes to the current year, with the exception of some employee comp and retirement standard rate adjustments. There was one other adjustment that I would note, and that is statewide pro rata, which was, that would include costs for the governor's office, agency, Department of Finance, those like-type agencies. Those costs are now stripped out of your budget, and they are a direct charge to your fund. So there was an adjustment downward. It's taken out of your fund. You're still paying for those costs, but it's a direct charge to your fund. Looking at your FM6 expenditure report, so that goes through the month of December, we're showing that the board is doing really well, that you will be reverting approximately $215,000 at the end of the year. Also, I'd note that this is a very conservative projection. Some of the things, particularly in your enforcement, we went a little on the higher side just in case some cases or something came down later in the year. So we feel really good about where the board is doing right now. I can answer any questions directly related to the projection.
Yeah, I had a question. Now, your budget, every time I look at it, and always the expenditures always over the revenue. Look at the year 2015, 17, 16, the revenue coming at 2.8 million. The expenditures are 3.8, so it's a 1 million short, okay? And the budget on this 2017 to 18, your projected revenue 2.7, your expenditures 3.4, is 700,000 is short. Now, all the year we short because we had the 5 million landed to the general fund, we collected. If we don't have that 5 million collected, we are deficit, the board cannot function, okay? My concern is that can you revise your budget on the 17, the 16 and 17 is gone because already happened. But the 17 and 18, okay, you should make this expenditure at least match to the revenue, which means you have to cut 20% your expenditure, or you have to somehow, some way to raise the revenue. Otherwise, the board, couple years, has run out of money. It's not going to work at all. So can you guys revise the budget for the 17 and 18 to make the expenses, project the expenses at least 20% less than right now? Or somehow we have to increase our revenue, Otherwise, the formula is that each year we short about 700 to 800,000. How many years? Then all the money is gone. We are not going to function. The board is have to close down. So I think request you to revise the budget if any possible.
So thank you for that question. That's a very good question. So if we look at the second document that we provided, which is the fund condition statement, this is what Mr. Chan is referring to. So clearly, yes, the board does have a structural imbalance where revenues are less than expenditures. And we know that. We've had this discussion with Mr. Bodea and his staff. So to directly answer your question, for the 17-18 budget, at this point, the 17-18 budget, which was released on January 10th, these are the budget numbers. So we would not show an adjustment downward. But let me allay your fears. So if we look at the very bottom, months in reserve. For 15-16, it shows 4 months in reserve. For 16-17, if you look up, we're seeing, and you referred to that earlier, the general fund loan. So you're being repaid $4 million this year. So your revenue of 2.8, plus you're having this injection, this repayment of $4 million. At the very bottom, you come to 14.7 months in reserve. Looking forward in 17-18, you're still at 12 months in reserve, 1 year. A healthy reserve is between 2 and 6 months. So at this point, you're very healthy.
Yeah,
So
I understand.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I understand what you're talking about, but the revenue, we are not talking about the real revenue. We talk about loan repayment. Those money is a previous board working so hard to save those money. I don't want our current board to spend all the reserve, okay? We have to have proactive to make those things happen without consider repayment of the loan. Because without the repayment, we already short every year, short 700 to 800,000. And how are you going to survive for that?
Right, which I understand the dilemma here. Whenever you have a structural imbalance, you're right. You have two courses of action. You can either increase your revenue or you can decrease your expenditures. And that's going to be an action upon the board. The board would have to take action to reduce its expenditures by what you're suggesting, 20%. And you would have to, accept the consequences of those cuts.
Matt, so what is our solvency compared to other boards? I mean, based on the.
You're very healthy. You're very healthy. Anything between 2 and 6 months is considered a
Okay.
healthy reserve.
Now,
There's
there
a statutory cap in
Right,
most
no.
of the boards of 24 months.
That's what I was going to ask. Okay.
So you guys are very, very healthy.
Okay.
You're not going to become insolvent, which is what your concern is, until this chart doesn't display it, but you're in the out years. I think it's 2021 is when you become
And then
insolvent.
every year we get an appropriation from the governor as well to ensure.
Every year you have your appropriation. So this year, your appropriation for the current year is 3,691 million. And for the 17-18 budget,
Right.
it goes up modestly. It's 3.2 million. Yes, your revenues are less than your expenditures, and the board will have to take some action in the future. And so it's nice that you're bringing this up, because you do have time. Whether it is a decrease in expenditures or you choose to increase your fees, you still have sufficient time to do that. Typically, if you increase your fees, you're talking about a 1 to 2 year process. Depending if you need to raise the statutory caps, then it's going to be a longer timeline. If you have to have a bill carried to increase your caps, and then you have to increase them through the regulatory process as well. So we're looking at a 2 year process. So I think it's really wise of you now for the board to start considering these things and working with board staff to come up with a plan as we move forward. I would just note, though, right now and for the foreseeable future, you guys are okay. That even though you are in the structural imbalance, you have a sufficient reserve, which you need to pare down.
Right. And I would agree with Kim, and it's good that we're looking at it now because it's time,
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Anything else, board members? Public comment? State your name. You have 2 minutes.
Neil Miller, California Society for Acupuncture and Asian Medicine. Yeah, I have a question regarding the general fund loan repayment. It lists on there that it's $4,000 to being paid in the previous 2 years, and I was curious as to, it doesn't list what the balance of that is, so I was curious as to how much money is still owed the acupuncture board that was borrowed from Schwarzenegger to the general fund.
I figure after we got the 4 million, we already got the 5 million back already.
We've gotten all that money back.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I would have to check the most recent general fund loan repayment schedule and get back to you. But I do,
It is listed as 4,000 there for the
well,
previous 2 years.
these are in thousands, so this is 4 million that's
4
being
million,
returned. 4
okay.
million. This
4 million.
document is in thousands. So I would have to return to the board and let you know if there are any outstanding general fund loans at this time.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Any other questions, comments? Great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate your time here today. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, we're moving along. We are now going to move towards item number 5, election of officers of the board. And I'd like to take a point of privilege for this item. Considering Hildy, our president, is not here, I honestly feel out of respect for Hildy, we should table this motion, this topic, considering she's been incredibly passionate, dedicated to her service here, and she's never missed a meeting. So I think out of respect for her, we should table this part of the agenda. So therefore, I motion that we table the election of officers to the next full board meeting.
That's good.
Second?
Second it.
Okay. Call the roll. Oh, public comment? Seeing none. Mark?
Okay, the motion is to table item number 5 to the next scheduled board meeting. Aguinaldo, here. Zamora,
Yes.
Jan,
Yes.
Cordino,
Yes.
Shea,
Yeah.
G. Kang, Pateki.
Yes.
All right, 6-0, table to the next meeting.
Great. We will now move to item number 6, staff reports, and I will let Ben take over.
Thank you, Jamie. First item of business for the Executive Officer report is the staff update. I am happy to announce that in the last 2 months, we have gone through the hiring process and have put out offers for the 2 vacancies in the analyst position. One is the CE coordinator and one is the exam analyst. We are waiting for the process to finalize, but I'm expecting a start date within the next month for both of those positions. And that is excellent news, as Jay and myself have been holding down the continuing education unit, and Terry Sinkovich, with the assistance of Tammy Stadley and Jay, have been holding down the exam unit. So thank you to all our staff that have been jumping in to fill that vacancy. In terms of the budget update, I think we got a pretty authoritarian kind of perspective, or I should say expert testament to our budget, and it's good to hear that we are doing good for a state agency, especially for accounting for a structural deficit. Any questions from the board members?
Nope.
Thank you. My report is complete.
We will now go to enforcement.
Hello. So this report is covering Q2 of fiscal year 2016-2017, which are the months from October 1st, 2016 to December 31st, 2016. We saw a total of 85 complaints received for the Q2. And 73 of those cases were either closed or referred to investigation. And we saw an average intake time of 3 days, which is complaint receipt to when it's been assigned to either an analyst or to DY. And we have our complaint volume chart showing that the most complaints were received in criminal charges and convictions. And then moving on to the investigations chart, there were a total of 73 investigations initiated. At the close of Q2, we had 124 investigations pending, and during Q2, we closed 71 investigations. And this is including formal investigations conducted by DOI as well as desk investigations conducted by staff. Our average days from complaint receipt to the closure of the investigation was 145 days. And then we just have a graph showing month by month the number of cases that were closed out and the average days for the investigation time. For the disciplinary actions, we just referred 2 cases to the Attorney General's office for Q2. And at the close of Q2, we saw 15 disciplinary cases pending. We filed 1 accusation, and there were 6 decisions that became effective. And of those 6, there were 2 that resulted in a surrender, 3 that resulted in probation, and 1 public reprimand. The average overall process time from complaint receipt to the effective date of those decisions, those 6 decisions, was 695 days. And there were 15 citations issued and 36 probation cases being monitored by staff at the close of Q2. So moving on to the trend analysis that we've seen when we compare last year's Q2 to this year's, just some notable things that we saw, so I'll just highlight a few. So for the complaint trends, the most notable changes in the types of complaints received were found in unprofessional conduct complaints, which decreased from 37 last year to 16 this year. The other noteworthy change in complaint volume between last year and this year are for unlicensed complaints. Last year, only 3 were received, whereas this year's Q2 received 11, which is a 26% increase. Our investigation trends, although there is a downturn in investigations initiated, given the decrease in the overall complaint volume, you can see that the investigations pending at the close of Q2 has gone down significantly. There were 192 investigations pending last year, whereas this year at the close of Q2 there were 124 investigations pending, which is a 35% decrease. Investigation closures have slowed, some due to the higher volume of backlogged investigations that have already been addressed in Q1 fiscal year 16-17 and the prior fiscal year. The other noteworthy change is the average investigation time decreasing by 35% from 222 days last year to 140 days this year. For the formal discipline trends, this quarter continues to show that the majority of the backlog from prior years has been worked through or already referred for disciplinary action. Another telltale sign that backlog cases have been worked through is the board's pending cases with the Attorney General's office. Last year in Q2, there were 27 cases pending, whereas this year there were just 15 cases pending at the close of Q2, which is a 44% decrease. The volume of decisions that became effective last year to this year are relatively similar. However, the average overall process time from complaint receipt to the close of discipline went down by 39%. Last year, the average process time was 1,142 days, and this fiscal year in Q2 was 695 days. It appears that the board could start seeing lower overall process times if a larger sample size were compared like annually, since the bulk of our backlogged cases have already closed out.
Great. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks.
Any questions or comments? Green light on. There you go.
I wanted to commend the work you and your department has been doing in the several years we've been watching this. I think the report has gotten better. The comments that you are presenting right now has improved tremendously. And the fact that we went from 1142 to 695, I think, is huge, all the work that we've accomplished. So I really commend you for all the work you've done. Thank you.
Second that.
Any public comment?
Neil Miller, California Society for Acupuncture and Asian Medicine. I've been coming, this year's 30 years I've been coming to acupuncture boards. I've made about 80% of them. This is by far the absolute best report, and this is the best board in 30 years. The complaints, and you can see that my colleagues agree with me. I'm really pleased that the sexual misconduct, which is the biggest thorn in my side, is down to 2 cases, which is really a sign of the board communicating it to the associations and getting that word out. I would like to know how we can even improve more. So if there are ideas from the board that you can communicate to the associations and to the general practitioner. I mean, there are some things that, there are new regulations coming up with hand washing and different things, and I want to make sure that there aren't consequences that could be avoided. So as we discuss the various things, I would like to ask the board to let us know, you know, the schools and the associations, how we can get the word out more clearly so that we can continue that these numbers go down. But my hat's off to this board. After so many years, I'm really proud of being a practitioner and having you represent us and protecting the public.
Great. Thank you. Well, Christine, thank you and Cricket, especially for, it sounds like you guys have a great relationship with DOI
Yeah,
as well.
we
So
do, yeah.
keep up the good work and hopefully it gets better.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll stay here.
And we are now moving forward to the education report. Whoop. Oh, CPI.
Yeah.
I'll just stay here just in case I have something.
Oh, right, CPI.
Okay, Jamie, I'll take that. Board members, this is a letter that we mailed out to all licensees that we oversee, with the exception of anybody who's been canceled. Obviously, we don't have jurisdiction over them anymore. But this is a short letter that we started working on last fall at the urging of legal counsel. And basically, the letter details 2 new regulations that have gone into place in the last year. The first one is the Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative regulations. And then the second one is the official notice to consumers of licensure by the Acupuncture Board, which just requires some certain things. And what we tried to do when we did this letter was just to sort of explain the requirements to licensees of both regulations. Basically, we've received some calls from confused licensees, you know, do I have to start doing something and everything like that. The calls have been fairly minor. We have 18,000, well, about 14,000 licensees after cancellation. We've gotten probably 50 or 60 calls so far about this, and we have trained our phone staff and our CIC people to answer those calls, and then if they can't answer those calls, they're referred to us, to staff directly, and we help them. We are going to be putting just sort of an FAQ. The link to the letter is on our website. We will be putting up a short FAQ just to allay any other questions people might have about the letter. Just, do I have to do anything? And the short answer is, well, you don't really have to do anything for CPEI unless, within 30 days you need to report, indictment, information, arrest, anything like that. You need to report that to the board within 30 days, and we've set up a special email address for that. But the regulation that does require action by licensees it's a fairly simple one, and it's consistent with what other boards have done. Which just requires that acupuncturists post a simple printed sign in 48-point type or larger, notice consumers acupuncturists are licensed and regulated by the Acupuncture Board, with our phone number and our web address. We are going to put this up on our website, so you can literally just cut and paste it into onto a computer and just print it out. And then you just have to post it in a public location so anybody who comes into your office can see it. And that's it. Any questions? I'm happy to, Christina and I are happy to take them.
Any from the board? Any public comment on this topic?
Ron Zeidman, Five Branches University. A note of appreciation for the communications that you sent out to us to guide us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no more public comment, we'll move forward to our education report by Jay Hurd.
Hello there. This report gives an opportunity to just share what's actually going on with education so that we can get out actually what's going on. One of the things that I've noticed from being a former licensee to now is that the actual work of the board sometimes is not well understood. And so this is just a way to keep people informed about what the process is going on, particularly in the education unit. So the compliance status in relation to the completed site visits at all of the 35 approved training programs is that the board has completed site visits and has obtained current CCR section 1399-434 curriculum from all of the presently approved training programs. The compliance status as of February 2017 is we have 14 programs that are in full compliance. 6 training programs have completed clinical corrective actions, and curriculum review has been completed by staff. These programs are in the process of submitting corrective actions relating to curriculum. 13 training programs have submitted clinical corrective actions and are pending review by subject matter experts. Following the completion of the clinical compliance, staff will begin full clinical review. All of the board's approved training programs have submitted clinical corrective action plans in response to the board's compliance site visits. 2 previously approved training programs no longer have board approval. Both of these programs were previously California approved but did not have the required ACOM accreditation, ACOM Commission for Acupuncture and Oil Medicine status. After initial inquiry with the accreditor, these programs have decided to not pursue accreditation. Board staff has resolved all of the status of all approved training programs currently lacking status with ACOM. The board and ACOM have established a clear protocol to verify and request accreditation status. ACOM directors and staff have been available, timely, and responsive to written requests for program status from the board. The education unit continues to revise and streamline the training program, initial application, and compliance reporting formats for clarity with the aim of presenting a simpler reading format without content loss. Okay, and then the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education and the Accreditation of Acupuncture and Oil Medicine collaboration update. The board continues to have close collaborations with BPPE within the Department of Consumer Affairs that is supported by an operational agreement that allows for easy and efficient sharing of critical information which comprehensively supports ongoing compliance, enforcement, and complaint processes. Board staff has cultivated direct and responsive contacts within the Bureau to assess inquiries and concerns with both the education and enforcement units at BPPE that facilitates observance of the appropriate jurisdictions on the part of both entities. The board is processing current reviews and evaluations that are a result of joint actions, including planned future operations in conjunction with BPPE. Work with BPPE is a natural collaboration as they are the state's institutional education oversight and have direct relationships with the board's approved training programs. Regional accreditation does grant qualifying programs to be exempt for BPE approval. So that's an interesting little loop there. So with ACOM, in addition, the board staff has developed similar process to share relevant information and program status with ACOM. Board staff has continued to build working cordial relations with appropriate context to facilitate collaborations and efficiency for both organizations, resulting in improvements and in acupuncture training program approval process. Board staff were recently briefed by ACOM accreditation director in a recent meeting that focused on the discussion of the first professional doctorate or entry-level doctorate degree. And an invitation has been made and accepted by the commission to present information to the board directly at a future board meeting. It was only schedule conflicts that prevented this from happening now. This report will offer, the report I'm going to give is going to offer a simple overview of the entry-level degree program. So the key points of interest as they relate to California approval process are, ACOM currently offers the FDP accreditation as a substantive change process to programs that already have institutional and/or programmatic standing with the Commission. All programs offered by the institution applying for this substantive change must be in compliance to allow for the addition and the final approval of an FPD training program. The formal letter of intent is not considered to be submitted to the commission until after the one-day orientation has been made by an ACOM director and completed at the institution. This is significant as the letter of intent is the minimum requirement of involvement with ACOM for programs seeking California training program approval. So overall, we've really worked out that process of when that action takes place and when they're to move on. There are currently 14 programs that are actively pursuing first professional doctor accreditation nationwide. It's not just in California, but many are in California. And they're all in various states of this, stages of this process. Action by the Commission in relation to granting candidacy or accreditations to program occurs at their biannual meetings, much like our board meetings. So programs have to wait for that to have the official, action by the Commission. To date, ACOM has yet to grant candidacy status to any FPD program, although programs reaching candidacy are expected as soon as this spring. This is relevant as these entry-level training programs are substantially different programs and as such require independent curriculum review by the board. In summary, the collaboration between the board, ACOM, and BPP has established setting of clear communication criteria guidelines when, what, and how the agencies have share critical information while responding and supporting the boundaries of all agencies. A clear understanding of each organization's role in the process, scope of operation, jurisdiction in the training program approval and oversight process, and has validated through experience the integrity of the program approval process as required by SB 1246. Okay, so that's that part. And just an update on our tutorial program. There are currently 52 active tutorials in progress. 2 applications for a tutorial program are actually on my desk currently right now. This program is currently available to students and represents a very historically traditional process for the apprentice learning and transmission of Asian medicine. Program administration and application processing of this unit is current. And if you look at that, actually the tutorial program is like a little small school at the board. So, and that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, Jay, for that comprehensive report.
Right.
I think you answered all my questions.
Okay.
Anything else from any of the board members? Jean?
I'm so glad that we have this report because I think for many years we didn't have it.
Right.
And so I'm really glad, Jay, that you have taken upon your position to do so. Regarding and I'm glad that the topic of the FPD is on here and you've discussed this because it's something that I've also have been concerned about and asked for. So in your discussions, our statutes approve a master's program and the FPD in that discussion. Is there anything that the board needs to take action on as far as when those programs come to completion and need approval? Is there any actions that we need to take at this time?
Currently, the way it's set up right now, the role of the board is curriculum review.
Sure.
And so basically, we're reviewing our standards based on 1399-434.
Sure.
And where the board does not look at the degree level, the master's, the doctorate, whatever.
Sure.
The reason that this is important to the board is that they're going to be entry-level programs
Sure.
leading to licensure, so their
Sure.
curriculum will have to be evaluated. So our process is basically staying the same, and because of the way it went with SB 1246, the process is now a desk audit, or possibly could be on-site, but there, as you've seen, these reports are not going for the board to vote on, and that's how the process will continue. Now, we have access to the report, and that's why I'm mentioning, what programs have been done, and if any board member wants to see those reports, they'll be available. And
Which
it's,
reports, Jay?
Huh?
Which reports are
The compliance reports.
Okay, got
You know,
it.
in general, or any kind of school approval reports we're working on. Because in a sense, the compliance reports and the new approvals are going to be a very similar process. And basically, just to share that process, when I do a review, they present all of their curriculum on our currently it's called an Appendix C, that just maps out the current 1399-434 standards. And then I validate per hour and per each syllabus. So when they submit it, I look at every single syllabus. I look at it all the way through the course description, the course outlines, and validate it for the hours of the course, the hours of the sections, the totals hours of the program, the clinical hours. So that's our process, basically. So, you know, really the degree issuing is much more of a concern for BPPE and ACOM. For us, it's really just meeting our standards, which leads to licensure. So that's basically what we're doing. So I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions for Jay?
I think
Dr. Mateki?
yeah. I just, you know, the curriculum, you know, when the board does a review, now we supervise that portion, curriculum, the timeline. So with this FDP and, you know, the licensure, and you tailored the curriculum, there's any difference or the extra amount, the burden or the work?
There is. The new regulation requires the board to, when they're presented with an application, to complete a curriculum review within 30 days. And actually, if I have all the materials in front of me, I can do a review in less than a week if I can focus my attention on that. Now, you know, what Ben had said with our staffing issues, whatever, there's been a lot going on. And so that's been challenged. And we also had a huge backlog of reports to do that I inherited. So, but the 30 days is actually quite doable. One of the issues that comes up for me when I'm doing the reviews is that the schools all take varying times to process the reports. So we've been generally giving them, in the past, about 60 days to respond. You know, so the way the program's going to move forward now is if a new school applies, we'll complete the review, and if there's any issues on it, it'll go back to the school and it'll start that new 30-day clock. And so every time it goes back, it'll start a 30-day clock. So it'll work itself way out like that. And it's very interesting because our schools, like a lot of the things with this medicine, are not consistent. So some schools are super responsive, give me everything I need right away, and other ones struggle with creating the materials. Other ones struggle with meeting timelines, those kinds of things. So there's a number of challenges, much like enforcement, that create delays that are sort of out of education's control. But anyway, our remedy for that is that we'll honor the 30-day evaluation, and then if there's an issue, then it'll just reset that 30-day response. Okay?
Thank you.
So it's functional, like those 30-day requirements and all the things that have been written into 1246 so far from your experience has been workable and functional?
It will be once we get the backlog of the compliance
Okay.
reports out, because I have about 4 schools right now that are ready to move forward with that process. But we're not getting everybody in the country at once. So I think if they're trickling in like 2 or 3 a quarter, it's very much doable.
I'm just happy to hear that, because previously we were told that it wasn't. So I'm happy to hear today from you, that's in the motion of doing it, that it is doable and it is functional. Thank you.
Right. Well, and you know, for the fact is that we don't need to do a site visit. We don't need to bring it back to the board to vote multiple times. It really creates efficiency for that process.
Good, thank you. Very good.
And a point of clarification, if I may add. Now, Jay's timeline for a week to do the review is if he has absolutely nothing else to do. Does not answer calls, does not answer emails. We did a process map on it, and it takes a full week of dedicated attention. So keep in mind, if there's 2 applications on the table and he has to answer emails, it does extend the time. But we are using the SB 1246 of 1 month to respond. And that process, if a school does not meet the curriculum, it gets denied. The curriculum does not pass what it has to show us. So it gets denied. Then the school has 30 days when they submit a new curriculum. It's not 30 days from that letter to them saying your curriculum does not meet our requirements. It just stops. They get a denial, and they can submit a new application with new curriculum addressing those deficiencies. There's no more corrective action phase of the review.
Okay, and on average, is it, I mean, we say we have a backlog because we're shorthanded, but generally speaking, is that something that we're dealing with, like a backlog of 4 or 5 schools? Is that general, or is it usually 1 or 2? I mean, like, generally speaking, we're backlogged because of short staff, correct?
Well, that's one part of it, but the other one is that the way that it was done because of out-of-state travel and some of the things, that was chosen to do a lot of site visits without completing the curriculum reviews, right? So that we just ended up with a lot. So when that's done, we'll have all of our schools done, and that will go away. So it's sort of a natural, comprehensive process that we're kind of doing the encyclopedia. And I just want to add what Ben says, too, is the way it works is that we're going to get an approval of curriculum. So we'll start and we'll do that first. And then we get that back to school, and let's say their curriculum is there. Then we'll verify with BPP and ACOM. And then if everything's there, then we do the final. Then that's where the approval process takes. And that's when they'll go on our website as approved program and be able to submit their students for the licensing exam. And so whether it's an FPD or a master's program, that'll go through that exact same process.
It seems doable in the time frame and so forth. Okay,
Yeah,
I just needed to know that part.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And if I can also add, just to reiterate Jay's point, so ultimately, the board is not giving final approval on a school. They're approving the curriculum. But the board is in charge of coordinating with ACOM and BPPE before they can grant that school the full approval to start their clinic. Okay,
Got it, understood.
thank you.
Us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any comments from the public?
Neil Miller, California Society for Acupuncture and Asian Medicine. Very good report, Jay, thank you. I have a comment regarding the 14 programs that are in compliance, and then you list the 6 and the 13 that are not quite in compliance, but it doesn't list what those schools are. So I would think that it would be advantageous to report to the consumers or to a school, to students, you know, if those are serious problems or little problems, or list not only the 9 out of the 14 that are in California, there are 5 that aren't, but the other programs that don't quite meet it. Is it a big problem? Is it a little problem? Is you're going forward to recommend to consumers? And I don't expect an answer now, but maybe going forward, you could think about including a little bit more information that might be a little bit more helpful to, from a consumer standpoint, looking at the different schools and how they are in compliance. But I think it's a very good report. And I have another comment where it says that it requires independent curriculum review by the board. I don't know, most of you know, but there was a curriculum competency subcommittee that took an over a year's process, and I know that it's in the notes of past and all of those, and there was an official report that was done, and I think it would be very helpful to expedite the board looking at some of the curriculum competencies that a year's worth of listening to the various players, schools and practitioners and such, public members that participated and put input into that. And I wanted to know about as you're looking at the curriculum competencies and they're going to this doctorate level of education, one is from an academic point and one is from a licensing standpoint. And so you have an academic title and a licensing title, and I'm not very clear, so going forward, maybe there could be some clarity about what a person could put on their business card in relationship to what to call you. I'm a doctor, I'm not a doctor, and so on.
Well, I could,
That's not really in terms of the curriculum. What's agendized is curriculum review and an update on the collaboration with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary. An update on the collaboration with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education and Accreditation Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine.
and I can't address your thing. The reason that the schools that were left off, there was a reason for that, and it has to do with some sort of our regulatory delays. And so I can name the ones that were complete. I couldn't name the ones that are in some kind of a process right now. And the schools that are going to lose approval, that hasn't been finalized yet, so I can't name those yet. But I was definitely aware of that, so it's, I take it.
I was kind of trying to draw the line between process and a problem.
Right.
They're in a process or there's a problem. And
Right.
to identify that.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none. Jay, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the great work that you've been doing with ACOM and APE. I know you've been working several months with Ben on that, so congratulations. We'll move forward to the regulatory update.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, board members, this is just our current list of past and future regulations. It's our standard format. I'll just go through each one real quickly and review that. Uniform standards related to substance abusing licensees. Oh, you may have to turn your packet sideways to read it. We added an extra column to keep track of due dates and all that, so if you're a little confused, which I was. Anyway, SB 1441, this one is, I'm finalizing the rulemaking submission. It will go to DCA Legal, and then from there it goes to the Director's Office and to agency, and then ultimately to OAL. We're required to have that back to OAL by April 4th. I'm fairly confident that it'll get there, but you never know, so we're going to push for that. SB 1246, which is the next one. This is the one we've been working on for a very long time. This is, I spoke to our regulations coordinator this morning. She says it is currently with the Chief Counsel's office. From there, I believe it goes to the Director's office, then to agency, and then to OAL. Again, this is one that we have a certain urgency to get done, so everybody is aware of that need to get it approved or whatnot. Continuing to work through that. And if you go to the next page, have to kind of flip it over and turn your thing upside down again. Sponsor-free healthcare events, AB 2699. This was the regulation allowing out-of-state practitioners to come in and practice on a temporary basis in California as part of a healthcare fair. This was disapproved by OAL last fall. As you may remember, we brought it back to the board in December to make some changes to the text. Everything has been completed. It has been resubmitted to the Department of Consumer Affairs, and as I understand it, it is also with the Chief Counsel's office. And again, from there it goes to the director, then to agency and to OAL. OAL has granted us an additional 4 months to get the regulation back to them, so we have plenty of time as it works its way through the process. So that 2/16 date obviously has been extended. We just got that approval last week, and I was out of the office last week. Number 4, advertising guidelines, display of license number in advertising. We are still kind of reviewing this. This regulation has taken a little bit of a back burner just because we've had a number of other large packages to deal with. We will hope to be bringing that to the board at a future board meeting. The 5th one, prostitution enforcement and condition of office. The board approved our amended text at the 12/14 meeting. We are working on this package. It is still under staff development. The 6th one, continuing education ethics requirements. The Education Committee had approved some proposed texts at the December committee meeting. We will be revising it, including those changes, and bringing it back to the board in June for a full board vote. And then number 7, hand hygiene requirements. This package is also under staff development. Hoping to maybe have something for the submission to OAL by perhaps this fall, but obviously other factors come into play with that. Any questions?
Public comment? Seeing none, we will move to the legislative update.
Okay, board members, we only have 3 bills right now that we are sort of tracking. None of them are really, I mean, they're sort of bills of interest, but none of them really directly affect us. Probably the one that, basically the one that might be of some interest to the board is number 3, Senate Bill 27, which relates to professions and vocations military service. It would require every board within DCA to grant a fee waiver for the application and issuance of an initial license to an applicant who supplies evidence that they had served in the armed forces. It would only grant one fee waiver per license, obviously. You know, the amount of, currently right now we have 3 military licensees who are serving actively and everything like that. The number of people that apply with a sort of military background to become an acupuncturist is, you know, it's extremely minor because we only have 3 right now. But you know, this is one of those bills that it just sort of honors honors the armed forces by, you know, giving them a little extra push to go into their chosen field if they want to apply to be an acupuncturist. It gives them just sort of one tiny little extra incentive to grant them a fee waiver. The loss from these fee waivers would be very, very minor. It would be $300. So again, if we have 3 licensees, it's an extremely, there's no impact to our boards. So anyway, the other 2 bills are just sort of just regular sort of government bills.
Right, the first bill,
regulations, et
the
cetera.
first bill seems like a cleanup reg bill. So I feel like we've been doing that the last 3 years anyway.
Comes out every year.
So-
Yeah, comes out every year. They do it every year. They just sort of kick the can a little further down.
So we'd be okay, you know, considering we've already been doing this work.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. And then number 2, this one is eliminate the quarterly schedule. This one's a little bit interesting. Obviously, we normally with a normal process with OAL is when you complete a regulatory package and it gets approved, it is then implemented on a quarterly basis on March 1st, June 1st, August 1st. I might be a little bit off on my dates, but it gets done 4 times a year automatically, and so this bill would eliminate that quarterly schedule. So anyway, that's it for legislative bills. Any questions? We do have the legislative and regulatory review section in DCA. They keep very close eye on the legislature. I mean, we track it as staff. We do track the legislature. We do searches. We look at bills that might impact us. But we do have a dedicated person over at DCA who does all of our tracking for us.
Perfect.
And sends us updates almost every week. And we're in regular communication. So if there's something that comes up, obviously we will bring it to the board's attention.
Gotcha.
So.
Sounds good. Comments, questions?
If I may add, the board also attends the legislative roundtable, where we do meet up with our legislative analyst, Heather Olivares, and Mark and I attend when we can as well.
And since I've commended the education report and Christine's, I also wanted to commend Mark and all the work you've done in the last 3 years. There's been so many regulations that have come through, not just pertaining to the acupuncture board, but across the board. And I think we've gotten a lot done since 3 years ago. So thank you so much for all your work and all the staff's work too. And I think during the well-deserved vacation that Ben was on, I thought Mark and the staff did a good job keeping us informed and making us feel like we didn't lose a beat. So thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Any public comment on legislation?
Good morning, Jacques Marco, Empress College, Santa Monica. Mark, I really appreciate the comments that you made, especially for our veterans. Right now at Empress College, we have about half a dozen veterans that are in the program, and it's certainly appreciated.
Right.
We are really very big supporters of our veterans. We do the stand down, and our director of admission is also a veteran, so she can pass that on, and hopefully we can have a dateline on when that will be in effect.
Right, it's a bill that's, it has not had a hearing date yet set, so
Yeah.
it'll kind of work its way through the process, and if it does, there's no reason to think anything would ever happen to this bill, so it would probably be signed by the governor and probably be in law, I'd imagine, early next year, so that's when we'll
Okay,
look at it again.
that's a very good plus. Thank you very much.
Right, and I'd like to make a comment regarding the bill. If we meet prior to, I'm trying to think of the updates. If we have another meeting in May or June, Mark, let's bring this up again so we can take an official position on the bill. I think it's too early right now to take one, but I think this is a pretty simple bill for us to honor our veterans, so let's make a note of that.
Wonder what's gonna happen if, or when we ever do any transition to the, NWCA exam, and how that fee will be.
That's not
taken care of.
agendized right now, so I would advise.
No, I know it's not, I'm just mentioning as a comment, right?
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we're moving along. So move on to, we're gonna move on to item number 7, presentation on the role of a regulatory board by our legal counsel, Kelsey Pruden.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President and board members and staff and public. This morning, first of all, my name is Kelsey Pruden. I am the legal counsel assigned to the Acupuncture Board through the Department of Consumer Affairs Legal Affairs Division. And I was asked to do a presentation. It's going to be very brief, short, sweet, and to the point, on the role of a regulatory board. And the reason that my presentation is going to be so short is that I think that actually there are 2 statutes in particular that really get to the essence of the role of a regulatory board. So I'm going to go ahead and read those, so bear with me. The first actually comes from your own Practice Act. It is Business and Professions Code, Section 4928.1. And that statute says that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the Acupuncture Board in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. And then the second one comes from what we call the General Business and Professions Code that applies to the department as a whole. And that is Business and Professions Code Section 101.6. The boards, bureaus, and commissions in the department are established for the purpose of ensuring that those private businesses and professions deemed to engage in activities which have potential impact upon the public health, safety, and welfare are adequately regulated in order to protect the people of California. To this end, they establish minimum qualifications and levels of competency and licensed persons desiring to engage in the occupations they regulate upon determining that such persons possess the requisite skills and qualifications necessary to provide safe and effective services to the public, or register or otherwise certify persons in order to identify practitioners and ensure performance according to set and accepted professional standards. They provide a means for redress of grievances by investigating allegations of unprofessional conduct, incompetence, fraudulent action, or unlawful activity brought to their attention by members of the public, and institute disciplinary action against persons licensed or registered under the provisions of this code when such action is warranted. In addition, they conduct periodic checks of licensees, registrants, or otherwise certified persons in order to ensure compliance with the relevant sections of this code. So, what does all that mean? Regulatory boards are creatures of the legislature. They've been referred to as that. They may exercise certain authority to that end, but they have to be granted that authority. So everything that your board can do is because it's been granted to you in your Practice Act. You have the authority to do certain things, to carry out certain functions that the legislature has deemed important and has tasked you with. So the legislature sets those types of things. They set the scope of practice. They establish mandates, public protection being your highest mandate. They establish the authority to act. And boards can act in various different ways, the first being policy. You are acting today by having a board meeting. You're setting policy, you're putting procedures in motion, and that type of thing. The second way is legislation. The boards can sponsor bills. They can go seek to change their statutes. They can also act, as we just discussed, with legislation by taking official positions on potential bills that may affect their board. And the third way that boards can act is through regulation. And we've talked a lot about regulations. We've had a lot of regulations recently. But regulations implement, interpret, and make more specific a statute that's already in place. So again, going back to the authority, once you have the authority, if you need to implement, make more specific, or interpret that statute, that's how you do so, is through regulation. So how boards protect the public. Boards protect the public by licensing qualified applicants. And that includes developing licensing standards, which can include education, curriculum review, continuing education, and setting examinations, and those types of things. They carry out disciplinary functions. And just emphasis that it's, again, on public protection and not on punishment of licensees. But it's a way to ensure that those practicing are practicing in a safe manner and are not harming consumers, and those that have harmed consumers are either placed under the watch of the board or are no longer able to practice. So that includes, again, licensing, doing, if somebody has an application in and they have, for example, a criminal background that relates somehow to the qualifications for acupuncture, then the board can put that person on a probationary license. They include disciplinary matters, petitions for reinstatements, petitions for modifications or terminations of probation, as well as some citations. And the third thing is that boards can protect the public by adopting regulations regarding the practice of the profession. So they set standards, they interpret their statutes, they and make more specific and carry out those statutes. So that is, in a nutshell, the role of a regulatory board. Are there any questions?
I have one, Kelsey.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about public protection versus not punishment?
Yes. So in the role of the disciplinary realm, there's a case law, and I believe that I don't have it off the top of my head, but I could look it up for you. But it came from the Medical Board of California, and it essentially said that the role of the board is not to punish an individual. The role of the board is to protect the public. So when carrying out your disciplinary function, you should only be disciplining to the point that it protects the public. So it's more about how to ensure that this individual is going to safely practice, or if the board does not feel that the individual can safely practice, then to remove that person from the profession. But it's never about punishing that individual for those actions. That is intended to be more of a criminal charge and to be in the criminal realm. So, and then the legislature has also spoken on it as well in some practice acts, not necessarily yours, but in some practice acts, the legislature has said things like rehabilitation is actually what we want. We want people in the profession. We don't want to prohibit them from being in the profession. So when doing discipline, the boards need to be cognizant of rehabilitation. And that's always something that the board looks at in disciplinary matters is, you know, those factors of rehabilitation. Can this person safely practice?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Public comment?
Neil Miller, California Society for Acupuncture and Asian Medicine. Yeah, I really like your report. I have a question regarding ways that the board can act as far as legislation, because the board has not really put forth much legislation. And so I have a for instance. The board has issued many statements in the past regarding Asian massage, which is what is currently listed in the scope, in the statute. Used to say Oriental massage was changed to Asian massage, and it creates a lot of problems. And we've brought this up. There have been a number of bills that have been brought forward that the board supported. It actually was just vetoed by the governor, but it went through. And I still think it's a very active thing. So could the board itself, rather than taking a position on someone else's legislation, if it was identified to the board as a problem, and it's been a problem, they've written many letters to insurance companies saying that the term manual therapy is more closely related to what it is. If you Google Asian massage, you get a lot of prostitution on there, versus what the intent of the law is. So if that were to be agendized for another meeting and it was put on there and they discussed it and the board felt that, you know what, this is a better word within the statute that better protects the public, informs the public, would it be within the board's purview to bring forth a legislative change to the wording of the statute? Not to change the scope of practice, but that it would clarify the scope of practice better for the consumer to understand what the scope of practice was by using language that was more current in terms of medical terminology. So would that be within the board's purview to make such a legislative recommendation?
So I'll answer just in a more general sense, not to your specific this
Perfect.
particular bill. But the board may enact legislation in such a way that if the board took a formal action that they wanted to seek legislation and to direct staff to work to find an author for a bill, that is within their authority to do so. Now, the language and all of that, it may not end up the way that the board ultimately wants. Obviously, the legislature has the last say in all of that, but it is within their purview to vote as a board to go to the legislature and ask for those types of legislation changes.
Great. It's just never been done before by the board, and I just wanted to see that they knew that they had that power. Great.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for answering that, because I think that has come up in previous years, but we also have, like, there are certain regulations that we can also do as a board too, so it's not just legislation. Just wanted the public to know that.
Yes, regulations are probably your primary function.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, when you have the authority and the ability to, within your statutes, you can promulgate regulations to enforce those types of things.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to convey is that legislative aspects we haven't been, as a board, being able to do, but not just approving other across-the-board regulations, but regulations that pertain to us that we want to initiate, we're able to do that. That is within our purview, because I get a lot of questions about changes of certain language, especially when it came to the curriculum, as we discussed last year. And I think Dr. Zeidman has brought it up, and I'm just allowing the public to know that that is within our purview to do. But sometimes we can initiate, but a lot of times it's the public has to initiate that desire as well.
And then, go ahead, ma'am. Your name, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Lillian Huang. I'm representing American Society of Chinese Medicine. I'm here because the question, I'm not sure who to ask. So I would say it would be probably best to ask you. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of, since the Olympics, so a lot of people heard about cupping, right? So cupping is our scope of practice. But nowadays, a lot of physical therapists is using cupping, and massage therapists is using cupping. So I'm not sure whether it will be, they don't have, it's not within their scope of practice, it's within ours. Do we need to do anything about it? Is there any way we could do anything about it? I'm not sure how we should approach that question. And also, with the physical therapist doing cupping, at first I wasn't feeling too okay with it. At first I felt okay with it, and then I read a newspaper of an article of someone says, the physical therapist saying that they're doing cupping, but a different version of cupping. Say they're creating a different theory behind it. But that theory, I read it.
We should probably keep it pretty germane
right,
to the topic.
Exactly. So I was wondering, then I felt, oh, we should do something about it. Otherwise, it's diverting to a different level. So that's my question to you, if we can do anything. Thank you.
And maybe I can help clean up the question, Kelsey, as it relates to the role of the board. Can you discuss scope of practice and
Absolutely.
relation to the board?
Absolutely. So The legislature sets the scope of practice, so when you're discussing what people can and can't do under their licensure, that is up to the legislature. That is what they determine, that's what they set into statute. And then the boards are, the different boards are then tasked with enforcing those statutes and carrying them out via regulations or, otherwise. So what I will say, very generally speaking, is I'm going to go back to your own Practice Act, which I read from, and the role of this board is to license, regulate, and discipline acupuncturists. So within your scope. So that is what this board is tasked with doing. And that is what the legislature has created the board for, and that is within the power of the board to do. So.
Comments, questions from the board? Public comment?
Actually, my name is Daisy, represent by myself, Ahola Clinic. So same question like Nancy. So I have many patients coming, complain about the so someone else like massage person, chiropractor, physical therapy, or other practitioner to do the copying to the other patient. So make a lot of injury happen. So that's why when you make the legislation and the board, I'd like to ask, request
Well, ma'am, we gotta make
clear.
sure that your comment is germane to the discussion of the role of the regulatory board. So is that what your question or comment is about?
Yeah. So like change to more clear the language. Copying definitely is just belong to Chinese medicine, and only acupuncture, licensed acupuncture can practice that. It's really technical. So you have to learn about Chinese medicine and meridian and qi, yin and yang. So much damage the patient complain. So I some facial massage, and also so stretch, and so I'd like to ask, yeah.
Can I make comment on that? Because I think this goes to what the other public was saying too. I think that's what Kelsey was saying.
I would just again caution to keep it to the role of the regulatory board.
That's where I'm going with
Okay.
this. So I believe that when these questions come up, they are not the jurisdiction of the board. What has to happen is the public and professional organizations have to come together and bring something forward for then us to bring forth any action, if any action is possibly even accessible to us. But complaining to us about that, unfortunately, we can't do anything. So you have to take the action of either writing down maybe the person that's doing it, or send a letter to the other board, or take a picture, whatever you can do. But unfortunately, that is a misnomer of what the public thinks we can do. So what she said really clearly is what we do is we police, we protect, and
license, regulate, and discipline acupuncturists. And the caveat being that there is a small jurisdictional issue where the board does have the authority to investigate unlicensed activity and to discipline those individuals who are practicing without a license. However, as I established or discussed in the Business and Professions Code, that has to be complaint-driven. So the board cannot just magically decide to start investigating things. There has to be a complaint, and there's a complaint process. But again, there is limited jurisdiction, and to reiterate that the legislature sets the scope of practice. So scope of practice is what people can do, how they can function under their different licenses. And that is generally the role of the legislature, not the regulatory board, to determine.
So I'd like to ask if the board can request, change the legislation, the language practice, scope of practice.
So that's what we're saying.
That would be strong.
We can't initiate that. That's what she just said. You have to initiate that, okay?
That means our job to do.
It's like, what's a good example? It's like going to, I don't know, it's like going to a fire department and telling them to arrest someone because they just robbed you. Same kind of municipality kind of department, but they don't exercise that power. So we can't do that. So this kind of goes for everyone. If there's practitioners that you see are not doing within their scope, we can't do anything. You have to bring a written letter, follow the complaint. There's a, I would like, if you can actually shed some light on that, Kelsey, explain if she has someone, or the other person back there has someone, and the other gentleman has a problem, people that are stepping or infringing on your scope of practice, and you're seeing it being done, or patients are complaining, what can they do to help maybe even empower us if it's possible? But what can they do to get this ball started?
So I'm not going to talk about that because it's not what this presentation is about. This presentation is about the role of a regulatory board. But I think that DOI did a great presentation, and I would definitely re-reference that. But again, so yeah. Okay.
That's the answer.
Thank you so
That's the
much.
Department of Investigation.
And again, there's always the opportunity for future agenda items, things of that nature, to address these types of issues. But that is the role of a regulatory board.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Any other questions?
Oh, real quick
Question.
question from Kit.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Can the board have some kind of referral hotline, let them, if the board is not jurisdiction, to the board, have some kind of hotline they can.
Kitman, I would just, because we're not really talking about a complaint process right now, we're talking about the role of the regulatory board, so I would advise as your legal counsel to, because it hasn't been agendized in such a way that would include a complaint, discussion of the complaint process, that we not venture down that road.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go over that in the meeting presentation. So, I think that's it for public comment. Anything else? Great. Moving forward. So thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Kelsey.
We take a break.
that. We're gonna try to move right through to lunch. So,
You think you'll get this done in 5 minutes?
we have individuals at the flight, so we're gonna try to go through 12:30. So we're gonna move forward to item number 8, discussion of dry needling or unlicensed individuals applying a needle to the human body. And I'm going to let Ben, our executive officer, walk us through that, as well as having Kelsey jump in too as well. So I will let Ben direct the conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. What I'd like to do first is really start out by establishing definitions of what acupuncture is as it's given to the board through statute and regulation. This is our authority, statute and regulation. So 4927 of the Business and Professions Code, Part C, lists an acupuncturist means an individual to whom a license has been issued to practice acupuncture pursuant to this chapter, which is in effect and is not suspended or revoked. Part D, just below that, acupuncture, in quotes, means the stimulation of a certain point or points on or near the surface of the body by the insertion of needles to prevent or modify the perception of pain or to normalize physiological functions, including pain control, for the treatment of certain diseases or dysfunctions of the body, and includes the techniques of electroacupuncture, cupping, and moxibustion. And what you'll note, that is the authority for acupuncture, and after that, we go to the approval of education and training programs. So the board's next priority is to set the requirements for a minimum level of competency of a licensee who is practicing acupuncture, aka needling, included in that. So that takes us to the regulations 1399.434, which we are currently redrafting, but the curriculum itself is not changing. In 1399.434.
Thank you.
And that establishes the minimum hour requirements that a student looking to take the licensing exam to have minimal level competency in acupuncture must satisfy at an educational institution to be able to needle and practice acupuncture. That is, 3944 is page 30 of, 29 of the January edition of the laws and regs. So I'm just going to go over the categories just to establish the educational requirements. I'm not going to go through the individual requirements. But basic sciences have a minimum, and these are minimum. California's education code requires a minimum of 3,000 hours of training to be able to have an acupuncture license. 350 hours in basic sciences. In acupuncture and oriental medicine principles, theories, and treatment, you have 1,255. These are all didactic courses. For the clinical medicine, patient assessment, and diagnosis, you have 240 hours. For case management, you have 90 hours. For practice management, you have 45 hours. For public health, you have 40 hours. Professional development, 30 hours. For clinical practice, this is outside of the needling taught in the didactic portion, clinical practice in the clinic, 950 hours. That covers all the educational training required to be able to qualify at the minimum level to take the licensing exam. The next way that the board has authority with acupuncture is through the enforcement of the Acupuncture Act. If you are referring to, if you can refer to 4935, page 6 of the January edition of the Laws and Regs. Portion B, section called Unlawful Practice of Acupuncture, section B. Notwithstanding any other law, any person other than a physician and surgeon, a dentist, or a podiatrist who is not licensed under this article, but is licensed under Division 2, commencing with Section 500, who practices acupuncture involving the application of a needle to the human body, performs any acupuncture technique or method involving the application of a needle to the human body, or directs, manages, or supervises another person in performing acupuncture involving the application of a needle to the human body, is guilty of a misdemeanor. If the board receives a complaint in writing, it then has the authority to look into unlicensed practice. The board cannot go fishing for unlicensed practice. The only way the board can pursue unlicensed practice is if it receives that complaint in writing. So those are the basics that I wanted to establish just so that everybody's on the same page and has the same definitions in California moving forward to discuss this next issue.
Great. Kelsey, anything to add?
No, not to that. So I think that at this point, the board has a few options. The board can discuss it as a board, this topic as a board. The board can table the discussion, or the board can solicit public comment on this topic.
So any board discussion?
No.
Anybody who has any comments?
No. I mean, I don't mind if the public comments, but I think what Ben did was a great job, and we keep it at that.
Yes, I definitely have something to say about this. There's been a lot of talk about this coming from the public, coming from organizations, coming from practitioners. And I think that's why a lot of you may be here today, is about this topic. And I've done a lot of research in this area, okay? I've spoken to practitioners in other states, in boards of other states, lawyers that represent acupuncture boards. And, you know, there's a little bit of a slippery slope and something we have to be careful of, you know, because no profession wants to limit any other profession from what they do, okay? And that goes for both sides of the fence. So we have to be careful the words we choose and how we explain what we're trying to, really what point we're trying to get across without really infringing on other people's rights and laws. In saying that, you know, I personally have been practicing Chinese medicine for over 20 years. Now, this is my personal opinion. This is not the board's view. I'll make that very clear, okay? And I've been investigating the neuroscience of acupuncture for over a decade now. I teach that internationally. And I get a lot of these questions when I'm speaking in other different states. What about dry needling? And, you know, is this, and that? And, you know, I think that, you know, the reality is that, what can we do with this? Is that I do have an opinion. And I have to be careful because I don't want to speak for the board, all right? And in short, we have to remember that, again, our position as a board is to protect the public, okay? We can't take on any requests by practitioners that may want us to try to fight for them for their scope of practice. This is something that has to be done by professional practitioners and by organizations themselves, okay? That's not our job to do that. And there's a lot to be said on this forefront for now. Yeah.
If I may jump in,
Yeah, sure.
Kelsey Pruden, Legal Counsel. So just to piggyback off of what you said, and I think that you did a very good job of explaining it, that also you have an opinion as a licensee, and you also have an opinion as a board member, and sometimes those don't exactly coincide. I do want to call attention to the board too, as well as we move forward with this topic, that there is a pending federal case in North Carolina, where the acupuncture board there has been sued by the physical therapist board.
Personally sued.
Yes, not, the board itself has been sued, as well as each individual member of that board. So in going forward, I caution the board that we really need to take a good hard look at what we want to do as, or what you want to do as a board, and that I can definitely do everything on my end to assist in any way, and that may mean that we discuss this today, but take some time to really look and see what happens with this case, or look and see what happens, in other venues, and maybe give me a little bit of time to do some research for you if that's what you want. But I do caution that this, that there is, again, with not only this North Carolina case, but the North Carolina case versus the dental board examiners that I've harped on many times, that I just want to caution and make sure that all board members know that there is potential liability, and that I'm here to assist in any way possible.
So Kelsey, would it be, I guess, allowable to say that ultimately there were some remedies mentioned during the DOI presentation?
Oh, right, so so I will say, yes, there are some ways in which I think, I know that a couple of other boards have scope of practice issues, and some of the ways that those can be addressed are having a meeting of the boards, having a meeting between EOs, having a meeting between boards themselves, even doing some sort of mediation over scope of practice. Again, there's always the complaint route. If there's unlicensed activity, and a complaint is received by the board, that complaint can be investigated. If that investigation warrants action, then action may be taken. The board has the ability to do cite and fines, to refer unlicensed activity to the city or district attorney's office. There's injunctive relief. So there are different venues that the board can explore, and that I would be more than happy to research those for you if and when that is decided.
Any more comments from the board before we go to the public?
Yeah, I just want to also just share that I wasn't just trying to give you my CV of my background of what I do. The reason is because the terminology has changed so greatly. In just the small 20-plus years, 30 years I've been studying Chinese medicine, from the understandings of the way it's taught historically to the way it's viewed now. And that gap of misunderstanding is what's leading other professions to, unfortunately, take our modalities. I'm saying that. Someone just mentioned cupping. It happens with gua sha, and it happens with needling. And I personally think that it's also a language problem and not a fear of trying to examine our modalities. And I think
Dr.
that
Cordino,
is
I
an
would just
issue.
try and, what we have agendized is dry needling and applying a needle to the human body, unlicensed. So in terms of the modalities and things like that, I would recommend that you just speak on the dry needling issue.
Okay.
I think it's important, just for me to reiterate Kelsey's presentation on the role of the regulatory board. And I think it's important for the public to understand, and I think a lot of you do, but our regulatory board jurisdiction is very specific. And I'm glad that Kelsey reiterated our role as a regulatory board. So please review that, and that could help you better understand what we can and cannot do. Secondly, Benjamin's report on California's educational training hours, I think is very significant because we do have one of the largest educational scope in the country, and our definition of acupuncture, as stated by Benjamin, is pretty clear. And I think based upon California's scope, our role of a regulatory board, and the specific definitions that Ben has mentioned, I think it makes a huge statement in itself. And I think as 3 acupuncturists on this board, all of us have over 20 years of experience. We are all very personally invested in this, but we also very much understand our role on a board and our responsibilities of a board member. So please understand that we are here to protect the public, but we are also aware of our regulatory roles here. So thank you.
Great. Dr. Matek?
Thank you. I just, maybe this is a question for Kelsey too. Early you presented the ways in which a board can act, policy, legislation, regulation. So, I practice Western medicine and Chinese medicine, and Ben has been really, said in the BMP code what is clearly what's acupuncture. So in California, it's very clear what we can do, the practice scope. So you mentioned about North Carolina. I'm not the one, someone just try to worry something. So as a board, if the part, do we need, have a vote on it? Do we need to find like authors? We really have a clear protection, knows for the public what's, need or not a need. So I'm just trying to kind of like thinking, we can act on the legislation. Do we need to do something, or we already have a clear cut? We are protected.
Well, from what I understand, it's already illegal to do this needling in California unless you're an acupuncturist. So it already is illegal, correct?
True.
Yes, and I have not had the opportunity to look into different states, the differences between statutes. If that's something that the board would like me to look at, I would be more than happy to present on that in a later, I won't be here for a while, but at a certain
Whoever your
point.
staff.
Yes, exactly. Someone can do it. Looking into the differences between maybe North Carolina, and I apologize because I did just look at this case yesterday, but there may be some differences, there may be some similarities. I would caution the board against, not caution the board, but I just want the board to be aware that when you do act, that is when liability can attach. And so if the board does wish to act, I would recommend that the board do so after you give the opportunity to legal counsel to look into all the different avenues and look into the different actions that you're contemplating. Because with the North Carolina versus Dental Board case, as well as this pending federal case, I would say that when the board actually acts, votes on something, does something, carries some legislation, something like that, that is when liability can attach, and that is when lawsuits can arise.
Right. So what I'd probably suggest is for us to, the board to wait to hear back from legal counsel. Considering all these cases are up in the air, I don't think we're going to make a decision on anything, considering it's already illegal.
No decision. I don't think there's any decisions to be made.
Just getting back to
Get back to
Dr.
us
Patel.
for what you find out in other cases,
Right.
and then let the board understand the situation. Because I listened and confused because he didn't talk about the case in detail. I said, how are we going to apply to the board? And so I'd like you to get, maybe.
And that's with this one in North Carolina, with the one sorry, they're both North Carolina, so it's a little bit confusing. So the one where the actual physical therapist board has sued the acupuncture board in North Carolina, that is still pending, so I don't know the outcome of that yet. If they've only ruled on certain motions, and so I don't know the outcome of that. It does have some interesting insight to it that I can definitely research some more and share with the board. And I have not had an opportunity to look at the different statutes and how they apply
And
and
Kelsey?
or compare.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I spoke to you yesterday about it. There's several states where this is occurring, and I would like to request to legal not just to look at North Carolina, but other states that has been involved. And I'm not sure if it's correct of me to name those states, but I'll definitely let you know, as far as my research, what other states.
Yeah, we can definitely talk online, and you can
Yeah.
definitely let me know
So,
which ones you want me to
yeah,
look at. Mhm.
that have been pertinent to the last, few months. So I would like to request that from you after the board meeting.
And can we even just like, it seems like everyone has to be so careful what we're saying. No one even said what the topic is. No one even said what it was. She said it.
I
and
announced
heard
it.
Jack.
I announced it.
What is it?
It's on the agenda.
On the agenda, it's right, Neil.
And what is that, though? What is the debate that we're having? What's the question? What's the concern that we have? The concern is that people are getting needled, they aren't trained properly, and it's causing a threat to the public.
There are 2 points to the.
Oh, we'll get to the public. We'll get to the public.
And, so that I think is something that is when we ask about going on in different states, what's happening is people are practicing this, and it's injuring people, and they're not being trained. And in the states, I think, that are losing, I think it's just simply because there's not enough population of the acupuncturists, they're not well-versed in the legislation or how to navigate through that, so they're losing it. I know we have a strong state, that's probably why it's not happening, but that is the concern, that people are getting injured. It just happened a couple of years ago, right in San Diego, but we didn't get the complaint, right? And why didn't we get the complaint? Because they're not licensed acupuncturists, right? Of course they're not. So we're not even getting a notice that people are practicing, if they are, and there's an issue. So that's another gap that we're still just trying to figure out how to navigate through to at least catch whatever do fall through the rope or through the net. But it's so funny, everyone's so delicate about that, and I get that, right? Because no one wants to get sued, but we also have to be able to state the problem, or at least see what we have to talk about.
Well, I
to
also
have
just
clear
wanna-
conversation.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to
Well, it
interrupt.
has to do too with our authority as well, Kelsey.
Right, so that's
Our
what.
authority is not scope of practice.
Right, the authority is not scope of practice, and the other point is that you're tasked with public protection, but it's public protection in the sense of regulating, licensing, and disciplining acupuncturists.
In our board, sure.
So, I think that can, that does limit you in some ways. And so, I understand the frustration with that, but I do want to reiterate that that is what the legislature has tasked your board with doing. And there is, there is that jurisdiction over unlicensed individuals, again, through the complaint process, and so there's that avenue as well.
And what is that process, now that we're on this topic? So since there has been cases where we haven't gotten that, I think, Ben, if you can please contact the other boards that, are on the potential violator list. If you can just contact them, I'd love to have a sit-down maybe with a couple of the boards, like they could send representatives and kind of go over some scope of practices, if that's possible, because it is something that we are supposed to be overseeing, and we're supposed to be governing and setting forth the training for those modalities, and it's not being done. So if we're not in communication with them, can you try to set that up with a couple of the departments or the boards? We can give you names of them.
I am in communication with some of the boards that overlap in this area in other states, so.
California, though.
No, I'm in communication with the boards here in California where this modality is overlapping in other states,
Gotcha.
so.
So you're in communication with the California boards?
Correct.
And how has that conversation been so far?
It's very friendly, very open, so we can definitely, I can definitely bring it to their attention that the board members or an ad hoc committee would like to meet with
Yeah.
them if that's within our purview.
Okay.
And, I just want to say, Kelsey, if you can help us, on this, definitely look further,
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other board comment before we go to the public?
I see who is attending this meeting here. And I know that there's schools represented. I see organizations represented. And I think along the lines of what other board members have said, I think it's important for the professional organizations and the schools and the students and everyone that is here to continue conversation, continue engaging in conversation among yourselves, and have your plan of action that may not be part of our role or our jurisdiction. So I know that a lot of times you look to us for support, and on the areas where we can, education, licensure, research, public outreach, all of the things that we're able to do so, we can in full force. But in areas that we're not, we or I look to the organizations and the schools and the students and the acupuncturists to take action among yourselves, because there's only so much we can do, and that's what we have today really tried to share with all of you, is what is in our purview, and what our abilities are as a board. But you have far more wide spectrum of power and influence over what's happening with this topic or any other topic. And I understand that I have friends from all over the country that is watching this, because I understand what we are doing here on this board in California. But I urge the public members here to do diligent research. And I repeat that again, diligent research, and read all the legal statements that have come out around the country regarding this issue. This is not the time to get emotional, but the time to really do your research on what has been said by New Jersey or by the AMA, the statements that have come out in your favor. So we have those articles. We are researching that as we speak, and we have been researching that. But as organizations and as public and as schools, I recommend that you also read what has been released in press releases or in legal statements that are in your favor. Yep. And the more education you get on what is the real issue here, it makes your job clear on your roles as acupuncturists and board members of your organizations. So I highly recommend that, and that will help us do our job in our purview and our jurisdiction, and you guys can do yours in the broad range that you have in your powered organizations. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. We're going to move forward and with public comment, but we have a guest speaker as a part of the public comment. We're going to call up Jason Kaiser from the Physical Therapy Board. And I think we're going to keep the same time limit to be fair to everyone else. Mr. Kaiser, 2 minutes.
I would not want to take any more time.
Great, thank you. So please state your name, and you have 2 minutes.
Good morning. Pardon my voice, I'm a bit under the weather. I'm Jason Kaiser. I'm the Executive Officer of the Physical Therapy Board of California. I was invited by your Executive Officer to sit in observance of this meeting, particularly for this agenda item. And I am here to offer myself as a resource to your members for any kind of questions that you might have about the governance or regulation of the profession of physical therapy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate the cordiality that this has taken place. I think it's really important, especially in California, that you're at our meeting and you're open to discussion with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming, even under your, under the weather voice. Yeah. We really appreciate you being here.
Not
Thanks.
a problem.
And sunset next week.
Yeah, I may be called away at any point because we do have a legislative session on Monday for our sunset report. So as you can imagine, there's some last-minute prepping and planning.
Oh, we understand all about that,
so,
yes.
I think.
Say sunset, yeah.
Yeah, sunset.
Yeah,
That's
we
all
do
you really
have
need
some
to say.
experience.
I think I can make some clarifications, though. I have been sitting in observance. I heard D of I's report. I think one of the things that needs to be clearly stated for the jurisdiction of California is that tissue penetration by a physical therapist is prohibited unless it's under specialty certification for either kinesiological electromyography or electroneurommyography. And as the executive officer or the complainant in the matter, I would not hesitate in sanctioning one of my licenses for practicing outside of their scope, nor would I hesitate in forwarding that complaint to your board. I've been the EO for 5 years, since 2012.
What's your name again?
Jason Kaiser. And it's not been my experience that I've ever received a complaint of my physical therapists performing needling techniques. I have heard on occasion, and in this meeting today and in your last board meeting, the issue of physical therapists practicing dry needling modalities within the veterinary hospitals or veteran hospitals. And keeping in mind that that is under the federal auspices of the military and not within the jurisdiction of the state of California. Oftentimes, those practitioners aren't even California licensees. They're licensees from other states where that might be legal under their scope of practice. If there was a California practitioner who was doing dry needling, even in a veteran's hospital, it's not within his scope. And then that would be something that would be jurisdictional for us. So just that point of clarity.
Perfect.
How about cupping and gua sha?
Let's limit it to dry needling since that's the only thing that's been agendized.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and then for further reference, the scope of practice for physical therapists is under the Business Professions Code 2620. And so that definition might be very helpful as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. I feel better.
Thanks, Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Okay, we're going to be moving forward to public comment. You have 2 minutes. Please state your name. And remember, it's germane to the topic.
Okay. Michelle Lau, President of the Keoma Council of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine Associations. And I just very happy to listen to the physical therapist representative, what mentioned about what we coming here today is not talking very detailed because I only have 2 minutes. It's very important for the board that you know your role is to protect the public interest. And we already have a regulation, the law in California. Nobody can practice acupuncture unless they under certain circumstances, like MD, dentists, podiatrists, and also acupuncturists. So, and we do have some people try to get into from outside the state, come to California. They try to doing the activities or education, continuing education for dry needle. But we have been, the profession actually, we have been done a good job. We already done a lot of working with the whole country now, that we really have a lot of information to support the Virginia, we support the New Jersey, we support the North Carolina. So everything that happening between the information with the dry needle, we have a particular people to watching it. So that's the reason I said that what we coming here today is just try to let the board or the board member, you understand that we protecting the public interest, that's where we coming from. Nobody can practice acupuncture unless they have a formal education and passing their state board. That's why we try to help the other state too. It's very encouraging that I heard that the board working with the other state. North Carolina, the board, we're talking to them. The New Jersey, Virginia, now we all working, acting very actively to support there. So thank you so much, and thank you for the job.
Thank you. Next.
Just 1 minute. My name is Daisy, represent myself. Just 1 minute, I would like to request the board, thanks for the Michael, make a good job and clear the message, but I would like to request if board can put in the public, the statement, strong statement in the public, then everybody know. So that's strong message. Non-acupuncture license who practice needles is illegal. So I would like to just request if board can make the strong message, the official statement. So that's what the organization requires. Also, would like to introduce the New Jersey, the January attorney to just make the judgment for the non-acupuncture practitioner who practice license acupuncture is illegal. I have the old statement here. I can just read to you.
Thank you.
So also the new message I'd like to give you.
Oh, yeah.
very much.
Do you have copies for public to review as well? David,
Thank you.
can give copies to Jay. Jay.
Great. Any further public comment?
Just a quick question. So,
Okay.
Wayne Matecki, so to clarify, Daisy left her glasses here.
Please state your name and.
Wayne Matecki.
Sure.
So just to clarify, I know we've been dancing around this, so I, as a practitioner, my job to get the ball rolling is to dig out the practitioners that are doing these procedures, acupuncture, whether it be physical therapists or nurse or whoever it might be, chiropractor, that is not licensed, and then file complaints with their respective board, with the acupuncture board, and with the DCA DOI. Is that correct? Is that how we get this rolling?
Well, it sounds like you're fishing there. You said digging. So, I mean, if you're looking to sleuth, I don't know if that's kind of vigilante justice.
No,
or
no, I mean, if we
whatnot, but-
know somebody that's doing this, or we hear
Yeah,
somebody
if
that's
you
doing
know someone that's doing this, so you have a complaint, you've been hurt by someone that's not licensed as an acupuncturist, then you just submit a complaint. And, you know, if you're an acupuncturist or you know the acupuncture board better than a physical therapy board, send it to us and we will share it with the physical therapy board or with the chiropractic board or a nursing board, whichever license type it is that is violating the Acupuncture Act. So the board can handle it and does communicate with the other boards.
So the complaint should go to you then?
It can come to us, it can come directly to the physical therapy board as well. You can CC either of us. So, but yes, we'll take your complaint and we'll look into it.
And you'd said we're talking there had to be an injury. Is that necessarily the case?
Well, injury, that's unlicensed practice.
Right.
So if somehow you have evidence that that's happening or you know that it can happen.
I think the actual terminology is information or complaint. So,
Information, thank you.
Okay.
Again, it would be investigated and then determined whether or not a violation took place.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
The board will communicate with the complainant if they can pursue any a citation or an action against the licensee. We might not have enough information. There might not be enough evidence. So the only way we can know is if we get the complaint in writing.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Brandt. I'm a private attorney. I was involved in the lawsuit in California last year to enjoin certain people from doing dry needling. We were successful in federal court, and I want to encourage you to let you know that it is clear in California you can't do dry needling. Also, you can't sell acupuncture needles to unlicensed acupuncturists. So we're talking about an issue, though, that's going to come back. And it's going to happen every year that we have the physical therapists come and hold their large conference in Southern California, for example, in which at that meeting where there's 500 physical therapists, they have these workshops. The workshops will train people in dry needling. So that was a lawsuit I was involved in to stop those workshops. So we heard from the board here today, the physical therapist board, that, if they get a complaint, they'll stop it. Well, I don't know what happened. It didn't happen at that case last year. So you do have the power, as counsel has noted, to enjoin people from doing that, to get an injunction to stop that kind of behavior, and you should exercise that power and do that because it's ongoing, and you really need to address it. So one last comment. I am here to tell you that I think that as a board, you don't have to worry too much about being sued individually. You can, of course, be sued as a board because you're acting in your capacity as a board and you're making legislative and policy decisions. That gives you immunity. I mean, your counsel can tell you more about your immunities for doing your legislative acts, but you're protected. So personally, you don't have to worry about it. And that's the way the law works. So I don't want you to worry about the fact that you can't act upon this issue for that reason. Also, I will make a promise to you publicly that Craig Brandt is going to act as your pro bono attorney as needed to defend you on any dry needling case that comes before you. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Neil?